My dear brothers and sisters, there are moments in life when everything feels still, when it seems as though heaven is silent and progress has paused. You have prayed, you have fasted, you have believed, yet the situation looks unchanged. But hear me clearly today, silence does not mean absence, and delay does not mean denial. God often works quietly before he works suddenly. The Bible is full of moments where God moved without warning. One day Joseph was forgotten in prison, and the next day he was standing before Pharaoh. One day David was tending sheep, and suddenly he was anointed king. One moment blind Bartimaeus was sitting by the roadside, and the next moment his eyes were opened. Sudden shifts are the language of heaven, and I believe with all my heart that a sudden shift is coming for you. You may not see it yet, but the spiritual atmosphere is changing. God is aligning people, opening doors, rearranging systems, and preparing opportunities that your natural eyes cannot yet detect. The elevation God is preparing is not something you can produce by your own strength. It is not earned by human effort alone. It is released by divine timing. There are times in life when it feels as though nothing is happening. You pray with sincerity, you declare God's promises, and yet the situation around you remains unchanged. Silence fills the space where answers were expected, and waiting begins to feel heavier than the problem itself. But spiritual truth teaches us that God's silence is never inactivity. When heaven seems quiet, God is often doing his deepest work. What appears to be a pause is usually a process, and what feels like delay is often divine alignment taking place beyond human perception. God is not a God of chaos or haste. He works with precision, order, and perfect timing. Before he moves suddenly in the natural realm, he completes his work in the spiritual realm. Many of God's greatest miracles were preceded by seasons where nothing visible seemed to change. The walls of Jericho did not fall the first day the Israelites marched around them, nor the second, nor the third. Day after day, silence followed obedience. Yet when the moment appointed by God arrived, the walls collapsed instantly. What happened suddenly was actually prepared gradually. In the same way, God often arranges breakthroughs quietly. He shifts hearts, opens pathways, and removes unseen obstacles while we continue to wait and trust. We may not hear his footsteps, but that does not mean he is not moving. Faith is required precisely because God works invisibly before he acts visibly. If everything were obvious, faith would not be necessary. Trusting God in silence is one of the highest forms of spiritual maturity. Scripture repeatedly reveals this pattern. Joseph's life did not change for years while he remained in prison. There was no sign that his dreams would ever be fulfilled. Yet God was working behind the scenes, positioning Pharaoh, preparing a famine, and developing Joseph's wisdom and character. When the appointed time came, the shift was immediate. In one day, Joseph moved from prisoner to ruler. The suddenness of his promotion was the result of years of unseen preparation. This is why waiting seasons feel uncomfortable. They challenge our need for control and immediate results. They force us to rely on God's timing instead of our own understanding. Silence tests faith more than struggle does, because struggle at least gives us something to react to. Silence requires trust without evidence. Yet it is in these quiet seasons that God strengthens our inner life. He refines our motives, purifies our desires, and teaches us dependence on him rather than on circumstances. God's sudden movements are never impulsive. They are intentional. When he moves suddenly, it is because everything necessary has already been completed in the spiritual realm. He does not rush his plans, nor does he forget his promises. What feels slow to us is often protection, preparation, and positioning. If God were to move too early, the blessing might destroy us instead of elevate us. That is why he works quietly first, shaping us into vessels capable of carrying what he intends to release. The enemy often exploits silence by planting doubt. He whispers that God has forgotten, that prayers have gone unheard, that hope was misplaced. But the truth is this: silence is not abandonment. It is often evidence that God is working at a depth beyond what we can see. Just as seeds grow in darkness beneath the soil before breaking through the surface, God allows growth to happen in hidden places before revealing the fruit. When God finally moves, it often surprises even those who have been faithful. The door opens without warning. The answer arrives faster than expected. The situation shifts so quickly that it leaves no doubt that God alone orchestrated it. This is the nature of divine suddenly. It reminds us that God is not limited by time, history, or human systems. One word from Him can undo years of delay and restore what seemed lost. Therefore, the quiet season should not be feared or despised. It should be honored as sacred ground where God is preparing something greater than we imagined. Staying faithful during silence keeps us aligned with the coming breakthrough. When we continue to pray, believe, and obey without visible confirmation, we demonstrate trust in God's character rather than in outcomes. When the sudden shift comes, it will make sense in hindsight. You will realize that nothing was wasted. Every delay had purpose. Every quiet moment was shaping the outcome. God's silence was never emptiness, it was fullness in preparation. And when He moves suddenly, it will be clear that what happened in a moment was the result of a faithful God working quietly all along. There is a common misunderstanding that hardship is a sign of God's displeasure. But in the economy of God, pressure often signals preparation rather than punishment. When life feels heavy, when responsibilities increase, when expectations stretch you beyond what feels comfortable, it is often because God is enlarging your capacity for what is coming next. Promotion in God's kingdom is rarely preceded by ease. It is usually preceded by seasons that refine, challenge, and strengthen the inner life. Pressure reveals what comfort hides. In times of ease, weaknesses can remain unnoticed, faith can remain shallow, and character can remain untested. But when pressure comes, it exposes what is truly inside. God allows this not to embarrass us, but to mature us. Just as gold is refined by fire, faith is refined through trials. Without pressure, there can be no purification. And without purification, elevation becomes dangerous. Many people pray for promotion without realizing that promotion requires preparation. God never elevates a person beyond their spiritual and emotional capacity. If He were to do so, the blessing itself could become a burden. That is why God allows stretching seasons. He uses them to teach discipline, humility, patience, and dependence on Him. These qualities cannot be learned through comfort alone. They are developed through endurance. Consider the life of David. Before he ever stood before Goliath or sat on Israel's throne, he spent years alone in the fields, protecting sheep from lions and bears. That pressure was not glamorous, but it was formative. The skills, courage, and faith he developed in obscurity prepared him for public victory. When the moment of promotion came, David was ready because he had already been trained in private pressure. Pressure also develops spiritual authority. When you have walked through difficulty with God, your testimony carries weight. Your words gain credibility because they are rooted in experience, not theory. God often allows pressure so that when He elevates you, you can minister to others from a place of authenticity. People are not changed by perfection. They are changed by someone who has endured and remained faithful. There are seasons when it feels as though everything is demanding more from you than you can give. Responsibilities multiply, expectations increase, and rest feels distant. In those moments, it is easy to feel overwhelmed or discouraged. But often, this sense of being stretched is a sign that God is expanding your capacity. Just as muscles grow under resistance, spiritual strength grows under pressure. What feels uncomfortable now is making room for greater influence later. Pressure also strips away self-reliance. When situations exceed our ability to control or manage, we are forced to lean on God more deeply. This dependence is not weakness, it is alignment. God elevates those who know how to trust Him completely, not those who rely solely on their own strength. Pressure teaches us that success, calling, and elevation are sustained by God's grace, not human effort. Many people quit in pressure seasons because they assume something has gone wrong. They interpret difficulty as failure rather than formation. But God often does his best work in seasons that feel confusing and exhausting. If you are under pressure, it may be because you are closer to promotion than you realize. The enemy attacks hardest when he senses advancement is near, but God uses that very pressure to fortify you. It is important to respond correctly during these seasons. Complaining weakens the process, but gratitude strengthens it. Fear shortens endurance, but faith extends it. When you choose to trust God in pressure, you cooperate with what he is developing in you. You may not see immediate results, but something powerful is being built within you. One day, when the season shifts and elevation comes, you will look back and recognize the purpose behind the pressure. You will realize that it taught you endurance, sharpened your discernment, strengthened your faith, and prepared your heart. The weight you carried was not meant to crush you. It was meant to shape you. Pressure is not a sign that God is against you. It is often evidence that God is preparing you for more. What feels heavy today is forming the strength you will need tomorrow. If you remain faithful in the pressure, you will be ready when promotion arrives, and you will carry it with wisdom, humility, and grace. One of the most powerful truths about God's ways is that his timing unlocks what human effort never could. There are seasons when progress feels slow, repetitive, or even stagnant, no matter how hard you work or how faithfully you pray. Yet Scripture and spiritual experience both reveal that delay is not denial. God is not bound by the pace of human systems, and when his appointed time arrives, movement can happen with breathtaking speed. What once seemed immovable can shift in a moment because divine timing releases supernatural acceleration. Human logic teaches us that growth is gradual and success is earned step by step. While this is often true in the natural realm, God is able to override natural timelines when his purpose requires it. He may allow a long season of waiting, not because he is unwilling to act, but because he is aligning circumstances, people, and conditions in ways we cannot see. When everything is aligned, God does not need years to accomplish his will. One moment of divine favor can accomplish what decades of striving could not. Throughout the Bible, we see sudden acceleration tied directly to God's timing. Abraham waited many years for the promise of a son, long past the age when it seemed possible. Yet when God's time came, Isaac was born according to promise, not biology. The waiting years were not wasted. They were necessary to demonstrate that fulfillment would come by God's power alone. When the time was right, what seemed impossible became reality without delay. Divine acceleration often feels shocking because it contrasts so sharply with the season that preceded it. One day you are struggling to make progress, and the next day doors begin to open effortlessly. Opportunities arise without struggle. Favor appears where resistance once existed. This shift is not coincidence. It is the result of God declaring that the season has changed. When God says, now, the pace changes instantly. However, supernatural acceleration does not mean chaos or recklessness. God's timing is precise. He does not accelerate before the foundation is ready. That is why waiting seasons often involve character development, faith strengthening, and internal transformation. God accelerates outcomes, not preparation. The speed of promotion is determined by the depth of preparation. When preparation is complete, acceleration becomes safe and sustainable. This truth protects us from impatience. If God were to accelerate our lives prematurely, the weight of the blessing could overwhelm us. Divine timing ensures that when acceleration occurs, we have the spiritual maturity to steward it well. What looks like slowness is often God's mercy, ensuring that when momentum comes, it builds rather than destroys. Many people miss acceleration because they grow weary in the waiting. They abandon faith, compromise values, or take shortcuts that remove them from God's timing. But acceleration is not activated by striving harder. It is activated by staying aligned. Obedience keeps us positioned. Faith keeps us expectant. Patience keeps us prepared. When alignment is maintained, acceleration becomes inevitable at the appointed time. God's timing also restores what seems lost. Years that appeared unproductive can be redeemed in a short span of time. Scripture speaks of God restoring years that were consumed. This does not always mean reliving the past, but it means that the impact, fruit, and fulfillment of what was delayed can come quickly and abundantly. God is able to compress blessing into a season so that nothing is ultimately wasted. Supernatural acceleration serves a purpose beyond personal benefit. When God moves suddenly, it reveals His sovereignty and strengthens faith, not only in the individual but in those who witness it. It becomes a testimony that encourages others to trust God's timing rather than their own efforts. Acceleration glorifies God because it makes it clear that the outcome was not achieved by human strength alone. For those currently waiting, this truth brings hope. The length of the delay does not determine the size of the breakthrough. A long season of waiting does not mean a slow future. In God's economy, waiting can be followed by rapid advancement. What feels like years of standing still can be followed by months of extraordinary movement. When divine timing unlocks acceleration, you may feel as though life is moving faster than you expected. Opportunities may come quickly, decisions may require urgency, and responsibilities may increase rapidly. But this is why preparation mattered. God does not accelerate to confuse you, He accelerates to fulfill His purpose. Trusting God's timing requires surrender, but it leads to peace. You no longer have to force outcomes or compete with others' timelines. You can rest in the assurance that when God's moment arrives, nothing can delay it. And when it does arrive, what once felt impossible will begin to unfold with a speed that can only be explained by God's hand at work. When God elevates a person, the world often measures that elevation by visibility, recognition, or authority. But in God's kingdom, elevation is never about personal glory. It is always about purpose. God does not lift people to make them impressive, but to make them effective. Every increase in position comes with an increase in responsibility, and every step upward in God's plan carries a deeper call to serve rather than to be served. Pride seeks elevation for self-importance, but God's elevation is rooted in usefulness. He raises people so they can become channels of His love, wisdom, and power to others. That is why Scripture repeatedly emphasizes humility as a prerequisite for being lifted by God. Those who are consumed with status are often not ready for elevation because they confuse influence with entitlement. God looks for hearts that understand that influence is a tool, not a trophy. True elevation in God's kingdom is measured by impact, not applause. When God lifts someone, it is so their life can bring healing, direction, and hope to others. He elevates voices so truth can be spoken more clearly. He elevates hands so more people can be lifted. He elevates leaders so systems can be transformed. Elevation without purpose leads to emptiness, but elevation aligned with God's intent brings fulfillment and lasting fruit. One of the greatest dangers in seasons of promotion is forgetting why the promotion came. When people begin to believe that success is a result of their own strength, wisdom, or talent, pride begins to grow quietly. This is why God often allows humility to be learned before elevation, not after. It teaches dependence in the hidden season so that gratitude remains strong in the public season. Those who remember where God brought them from are more likely to steward where God places them. Jesus Himself redefined greatness by connecting it to service. He taught that those who desire to be great must become servants, and those who want to lead must be willing to lay down their lives for others. This principle reveals the heart of God's elevation. God does not lift people above others so they can look down on them. He lifts them so they can reach further and serve more effectively. Elevation also brings increased influence, and influence amplifies whatever is already in the heart. This is why character matters so deeply. If humility is present, influence will bless many. If pride is present, influence can damage both the person elevated and those affected by them. God's careful preparation ensures that when elevation comes, the heart is aligned with His purpose rather than personal ambition. Another important truth is that God's elevation often places people in positions they never sought. Many biblical figures did not pursue status, they pursued obedience. Moses did not seek leadership, he resisted it. Joseph did not chase authority. It came after years of faithfulness. Esther did not plan to be queen. God positioned her for a purpose larger than herself. In each case, elevation was not a reward for ambition, but a response to faithfulness. God lifts people to solve problems, not to escape them. Promotion does not remove responsibility, it multiplies it. With greater influence comes greater accountability. God entrusts more to those who have proven faithful with less. This is why serving well in small, unseen roles is often the pathway to greater impact. Faithfulness in obscurity builds the trust necessary for God to release influence publicly. When elevation is understood as stewardship, it produces gratitude rather than arrogance. The elevated person recognizes that their position is temporary, their influence is borrowed, and their success is sustained by God's grace. This mindset keeps the heart soft and the spirit teachable. It also protects against comparison, because the goal is no longer to outshine others, but to fulfill the unique assignment God has given. God's purpose for elevation always includes others. If promotion isolates a person from compassion, something has gone wrong. True elevation enlarges the heart, deepens empathy, and strengthens the desire to see others rise. God's kingdom is not built on competition, but on contribution. When God elevates you, He invites you to become a blessing on a greater scale. Understanding this truth transforms how we approach promotion. Instead of striving for recognition, we prepare for responsibility. Instead of seeking applause, we seek alignment. When God elevates you for His purpose, pride loses its grip and purpose takes its place. And in that alignment, elevation becomes not a burden, but a sacred trust. One that allows God's goodness to flow through your life to touch many others. Waiting is one of the most challenging experiences in the life of faith, because it tests what we truly believe about God. When prayers seem unanswered and promises appear delayed, faith is no longer supported by visible evidence. In these moments, belief becomes a choice rather than a feeling. This is why the waiting season is so critical. It is not simply a pause between what was and what will be. It is a proving ground where faith is either strengthened or slowly eroded. Many people begin their journey with great faith when God first gives a promise. The vision is clear, hope is strong, and expectation is high. But as time passes and circumstances remain unchanged, doubts begin to whisper. Questions arise about whether the promise was real, whether God heard correctly, or whether the timing was misunderstood. The challenge is not receiving the promise, but maintaining faith while nothing appears to be happening. Faith in the waiting season requires trust in God's character rather than in immediate outcomes. It is easy to believe when prayers are answered quickly, but it takes maturity to believe when answers are delayed. This kind of faith rests in the understanding that God is faithful even when His actions are not yet visible. It believes that God is working behind the scenes, even when there is no outward sign of progress. The enemy often targets believers during waiting seasons because he knows how vulnerable the mind can become in silence. He uses delay to create discouragement and discouragement to produce doubt. Doubt, if left unchecked, slowly weakens expectation. This is why guarding the heart and mind during waiting seasons is essential. What you consistently listen to, think about, and speak will either strengthen your faith or undermine it. Maintaining faith does not mean denying reality. It means interpreting reality through God's promises rather than through fear. You may acknowledge the difficulty, the delay, or the uncertainty, but you refuse to let those things define the outcome. Faith does not pretend the problem is not there. It declares that God is greater than the problem. This perspective keeps hope alive even when circumstances are slow to change. One of the greatest temptations in waiting seasons is comparison. Watching others move ahead while you remain in place can make waiting feel unfair. Comparison, however, distorts faith by shifting focus from God's timing to human timelines. God's plan for each person unfolds differently, and comparing journeys often leads to frustration or resentment. Faith grows best when attention remains fixed on God's promises rather than on others' progress. Waiting seasons also reveal where confidence is placed. If faith is anchored in circumstances, it will rise and fall with external changes. But if faith is anchored in God, it remains steady regardless of conditions. This stability is what allows believers to endure long periods of waiting without losing hope. It is not that questions never arise, but that trust consistently outweighs doubt. Prayer plays a vital role in sustaining faith during waiting seasons. Prayer shifts focus from what is lacking to who God is. It renews perspective and strengthens the inner life. Even when circumstances remain unchanged, prayer keeps the relationship with God active and alive. It reminds the heart that faith is not a transaction for immediate results, but a relationship built on trust and surrender. Faith is also maintained through obedience in small things. Continuing to do what God has already instructed, even when results are delayed, keeps alignment intact. Obedience is a powerful expression of faith because it demonstrates trust without requiring immediate reward. God often honors this kind of faithfulness by bringing fulfillment at the right time. Waiting does not mean stagnation. While external progress may appear slow, internal growth is often significant. God uses waiting seasons to deepen spiritual roots so that when fulfillment comes, it can be sustained. Shallow faith struggles under pressure, but deep faith remains steady. The waiting season is where depth is developed. Those who maintain faith through waiting are often the ones who experience the greatest sense of fulfillment when the promise is realized. The delay makes the outcome richer, the gratitude deeper, and the testimony stronger. Faith maintained in the waiting season keeps the heart aligned with God's purpose and prepared for what is coming. When the season finally shifts, faith will no longer be a struggle, it will become a testimony. You will see that holding on to belief during uncertainty was not in vain. The waiting season did not weaken you, it refined you. And the faith you protected in the silence will carry you confidently into the fulfillment God always intended. There are seasons in life when it feels as though everything meaningful is happening out of sight. Effort goes unnoticed, obedience seems unrewarded, and faithfulness appears invisible. These hidden seasons can feel frustrating, especially when progress is slow and recognition is absent. Yet in God's design, obscurity is not a setback, it is a setup. Hidden seasons are often the most formative stages of a person's spiritual journey, quietly preparing them for the moment when God brings their work into the light. God often chooses to develop his servants away from public attention because visibility too early can damage what has not yet been fully formed. In private seasons, motives are purified and dependence on God is strengthened. Without applause or validation, the heart learns to serve for God alone. This kind of devotion cannot be manufactured in public. It must be cultivated in secret. When faithfulness is practiced without recognition, it becomes genuine and resilient. Throughout Scripture, we see that public reward is consistently preceded by private preparation. Moses spent decades in the wilderness before leading Israel. That time was not wasted. It transformed him from a man driven by impulse into a leader marked by humility and patience. David was anointed king long before he ever wore a crown. His years of hiding from Saul refined his trust in God and deepened his understanding of leadership. These hidden years shaped the character that would later sustain public responsibility. Hidden seasons also teach discipline and consistency. When no one is watching, it becomes clear whether faithfulness is rooted in conviction or convenience. God values what is done in secret because it reveals the true condition of the heart. Jesus emphasized this principle when he spoke about prayer, giving, and obedience done away from public attention. God sees what others do not, and he rewards what is faithful, not what is flashy. The discomfort of hidden seasons often comes from a desire to be seen and affirmed. Human nature longs for acknowledgement, but God uses obscurity to realign priorities. In hidden places, success is no longer measured by applause or comparison, but by obedience and growth. This redefinition of success protects the heart from pride when public recognition eventually comes. Another purpose of hidden seasons is skill and capacity development. Just as a foundation is built underground before a structure rises, God builds strength and wisdom beneath the surface before elevating a person visibly. Skills are sharpened, discernment is developed, and resilience is strengthened in private. When the public season arrives, what appears effortless is actually the result of long, unseen labor. Hidden seasons also foster intimacy with God. Without distractions or external affirmation, the relationship with God deepens. Prayer becomes less about results and more about connection. Faith matures as trust replaces urgency. This closeness to God becomes a sustaining force in public seasons when pressures increase and expectations multiply. Those who know God deeply in private are better equipped to represent Him faithfully in public. Public reward without private grounding often leads to burnout or moral failure. This is why God is careful about timing. He does not expose what has not been secured. Hidden seasons act as protection, ensuring that when elevation comes, it does not destroy what God intends to use. Obscurity shields the heart until it is ready to carry influence with humility and wisdom. When the time comes for public reward, it often appears sudden to others. They may see only the moment of recognition, unaware of the years of preparation that preceded it. This can lead to misunderstanding, but those who have endured hidden seasons understand that nothing was accidental. Every unseen step contributed to the outcome. The reward is not merely the position or recognition, but the readiness to handle it well. Hidden seasons require patience and trust. It is tempting to rush the process or seek visibility prematurely. But God's timing is precise. When He brings someone into the open, it is because the foundation is secure and the purpose is clear. Those who remain faithful in obscurity position themselves for promotion that is lasting, not temporary. In the end, hidden seasons reveal a powerful truth. God's approval matters more than public recognition. When obedience is maintained without an audience, the reward is deeper and more enduring. Public seasons may come and go, but what God builds in secret lasts. And when the hidden work is complete, God faithfully brings it into the light, rewarding faithfulness in ways that surpass expectation and endure beyond applause. As we come to the end of this message, one truth stands firm above everything else. God has not wasted a single season of your life. The waiting, the pressure, the silence, the hidden places, all of it has been purposeful. What felt low was shaping you. What felt heavy was strengthening you. What felt unseen was preparing you. God has been working with intention, aligning every moment with His perfect timing. A sudden shift does not mean an unprepared shift. When God moves suddenly, it is because everything necessary has already been completed beneath the surface. Your faith has been tested, your character refined, your obedience proven, and your dependence on God deepened. You may not have seen progress outwardly, but inwardly something powerful has been taking place. Elevation in God's kingdom is not about being lifted above others. It is about being positioned to serve with greater impact. God is raising you not for pride, but for purpose. The influence He is releasing is meant to bless others, strengthen faith, and glorify His name. What He entrusts to you will require humility, wisdom, and continued dependence on Him, and you are being prepared for that responsibility. If you are still waiting, do not lose heart. The waiting season is not evidence of delay, but of development. Maintain your faith, guard your heart, and remain obedient in the small things. The same God who planted the promise is faithful to fulfill it. Your responsibility is not to force the timing, but to stay aligned with His will. When the shift comes, and it will come, it may happen faster than you expect. Doors will open, favor will increase, and what once felt difficult will begin to flow with grace. And when that moment arrives, you will understand why the process could not be rushed. Stand firm, stay faithful, trust God completely, Because the season is changing, the preparation is complete, and the God who worked in you privately is about to reward you openly. A sudden shift is coming, and God is about to elevate you right on time.